I used to be obsessed with these brands and be so excited when I came across them in the thrift store, but nowadays I rarely, if ever, pick them up. Hey y'all, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is MOGIBETH, and for those of y'all who are new here, I own a six-figure reselling business selling women's clothing on places like eBay and Poshmark. And in today's video, we're doing a little bit fun, quick video just going over 10 brands that I no longer pick up at the thrift store. And of course, a disclaimer is that every single one of these brands, in very specific instances and very specific styles, I will pick up and I would recommend that you pick up, but it does require a fair amount of research and knowledge of what sells well within these brands, and we're actually going to go over the exceptions as well. But every single one of these brands almost, I used to be really stoked when I would find it at the thrift store, and just nowadays I never ever pick them up. So let's dive into number one. Okay, the first on the list is Wildfox. This used to be such a hot brand. I used to always pick it up at the thrift store, but then I also would experiment with it with retail arbitrage as well because it would sell really quickly. I even back in the day did a whole Wildfox haul on my channel. It's a really old video, but I'll link it up on the screen. Wildfox will typically sell in the $20 to $30 range for me, and it takes a while to sell. So with the sell-through rate and average sales price, I'm very reluctant to ever pick up Wildfox, but there are exceptions, of course. If I came across it in the bins, maybe depending on the style, I might be willing to pick it up. But the actual styles that do well are some of the sweaters. And there's one sweater in particular called the linen sweater that I find does pretty well. It's a distressed sweater, and especially the star print does well. And then there are certain graphics that just do really well, and when I was going through the solds on Poshmark, I really couldn't make rhyme or reason of why certain graphics do well and some don't. Probably has something to do with the saturation of certain pieces, but it didn't seem to be like a certain theme was doing particularly well. So if you come across it in the thrift store, it might be worth picking up. Some graphics actually can do well, but really generally I skip Wildfox altogether, especially things like t-shirts and basics. Pass. Okay, the next one on the list is maybe a little bit of a controversial one, and it's the one with probably the most exceptions, but it's a J. Crew. 9.9 times out of 10, when I come across J. Crew in the thrift store, I pass. And it seems like 9 out of 10 times when I put something in my cart from J. Crew and check up comps, I end up putting it back because comps tell me it's either saturated or just not selling for very much. That happened to me just the last thrift with me that I did, which I'll link up on the screen. I put a blouse in my cart that was really new. It was from a recent season. It was gorgeous, and comps just were horrible. So J. Crew was a brand I used to love selling. I would pick up all the time, and it was a good seller back when I first started reselling in 2017. But nowadays it is just very saturated, and there's just not a lot of demand for this brand. Exceptions are coats. Coats, especially Italian wool coats, do really well by J. Crew. And so if you come across an Italian wool coat in the thrift store, I would recommend at least checking comps and probably picking it up. Certain blazers can do really well, and in specific dress styles, especially recent dress styles, can do well. If I found a new tag sweater, I'd probably check comps, especially if I found it in the thrift store for an affordable price. But generally, I am passing on this brand. J. Crew, so sad. I just have to leave it behind time and time again. I actually went over J. Crew as an example in my research module in my course and just showed that you can still sell J. Crew. You just have to really know what styles are in demand, and you have to really kind of do a bit of research on the back end. But generally, those three kind of categories of coats, blazers, and some dresses can do well. Okay, that leads me to another brand that I used to pick up all the time and would be so excited to sell, and that is Anthropologie, and particularly old Anthropologie pieces. Old Anthropologie means brands like Tabitha, Idra, Angels of the North, Cartonnier, Daughters of the Liberation, Florite, Girls from Savoy, and the list goes on and on and on and on. All those brands, Anthropologie, to my knowledge, is not really making anymore. And the pieces that I come across, even when I check them, when I come across them in the store, check comps, I almost always put them back. They just do not perform well anymore. There are, of course, exceptions to this rule. There are rare pieces that are older that can do really, really well, and that does require just a fair amount of research, which you can do. And in fact, one way you can do this research is just by searching Anthropologie rare and going through solds, going through ISO listings, which is in search of listings, and just seeing like what older pieces of Anthropologie are people seeking out and are still in high demand, just in case you come across them in the thrift store, because I do come across older Anthropologie pieces in the thrift store quite often, but 9.9 times out of 10 I am passing. And it took me so long to really just stop picking them up and really draw a boundary with myself, because these are pieces that for so long in the beginning of my reselling career, I would literally do a happy dance when I found them. So sad to see you go, Anthropologie. I do pick up newer Anthropologie pieces, and I've actually done a video on Anthropologie. It was a while ago, but I think it's still relevant, that I'll link up on the screen, but very selective with even new Anthropologie pieces that I pick up. Okay, the next brand on the list is one that my mom absolutely loves. So I had a little bit of an affinity for this brand, but now I'm just tired of picking it up and I don't want to pick it up anymore. And that is, I might mispronounce it, Desigual. Is that how you pronounce it? I don't know. Let me know in the comments down below if I'm mispronouncing that brand name. But Desigual, I believe, is a Spanish brand that has a lot of loud prints, embroidery, lots of things going on in their garments, and very eccentric, very bold. And whenever I used to pick them up, they used to sell actually really quickly. And to be fair, I think actually Desigual doesn't perform that badly. Like, it's definitely declined since just a few years ago, but I think, you know, if you found the right piece, it might be worth picking up, especially if you found something like a coat or a jacket. Those tend to do really well, especially puffer coats and things like that. But I am just really tired of picking up these pieces. They have a slower sell-through right now, and they're just not pieces I particularly gravitate toward. And so I've just decided in my business I am done picking up Desigual. If you do want to continue picking that up, again, I would just recommend doing, 20 minutes of research just to familiarize yourself with what's selling well right now, because there is quite a disparity between the pieces that are doing well and the pieces that aren't. T-shirts and stuff by Desigual I would skip on, but certain things like t-shirt dresses sometimes can do really well. So I am passing on this brand from now on. Just don't want to sell it unless I came across a really good coat. But yeah, bye Desigual. Okay, the next on the list is a shoe brand that I actually come across quite often, and it's one that I've just been realizing recently that when I put it in my cart and check comps, I always put it back. And so I've just kind of slowly stopped putting it in my cart, and that is the brand Seychelles. This brand is sold at Anthropologie, and it's been around for quite a while, so it's really easy to come across older styles in the thrift store that aren't going to sell very well. Of course, there are particular styles that are exceptions to this, and it's really just certain ankle boot styles. Not all of them, like some of them really don't sell for a lot anymore, but certain ankle boot styles can do well. But things like flats and things like heels by Seychelles, I will just pass on. I won't even spend the time to look up comps anymore by this brand, which is kind of sad because this is definitely a brand that I used to be really excited to find in the thrift store, but alas, I'm done picking it up. Okay, the next brand on the list is also one that is sold at Anthropologie, but it's sold in other places as well, and that is Cloth & Stone. This might be a duh for a lot of y'all, but I stopped picking up Cloth & Stone a while ago. It used to be something that I would be so excited to find. I mean, when I started reselling, Cloth & Stone was it. It sold really well, but it was back in the day when people were wearing flannels and leggings and riding boots, and you just don't see that anymore. It's not the style and it's not on trend. And so I think Cloth & Stone is just a brand that is super saturated on the reseller marketplace, and they just kind of reproduce a lot of the same pieces over and over and over. So there's not a lot of differentiation between each style. In a recent bins video, which I'll link up on the screen, I picked up a Cloth & Stone piece and Crossroads didn't take it, and after checking comps, I'm really not wanting to sell it, so I might just send it into ThredUp and see next time that I can send into ThredUp, because they're not accepting any new boxes. But Cloth & Stone really just do not even consider picking up anymore. One maybe exception to this is jumpsuits. Jumpsuits can do well. Jumpsuits and coats are categories that can typically do really well on their own, even in brands that don't perform well. That's not always the case, but for this particular brand, I think jumpsuits actually can do pretty well depending on the style. Still look up comps for sure, but it actually just might be worth checking comps on. Okay, the next on the brand is an athletic wear brand, and there are a lot of athletic wear brands like Prana, Horny Toad, which is now Toad & Company, and so many more that I just don't pick up anymore. But this one is one that I used to be so excited to find, and now I just absolutely don't even look at, because I've just only had really not great experiences with recently, and that is Onzie, which I hope I'm pronouncing it right. It's a more yoga type athletic brand, and they have really loud print leggings. Their average sales price is so low, and they have such a slow sell-through rate. When I was going through solds on Poshmark, it was hard for me to even find a certain style that still did well. And the one exception is sets. Like if for whatever reason you came across a matching set in the thrift store or in the bins, which, you know, I have done before, then that might be worth picking up. But otherwise, I just skip this brand entirely altogether. Let me know what athletic brands you guys skip down in the comments below, because Onzie is one of them, but there are so many athletic brands that are just super saturated now, and there's just not a lot of demand for them on the reseller marketplace. Okay, next brand on this list is maybe also a duh, but this is one I actually used to pick up quite a bit, and it is Splendid. Splendid is a brand. It's sold at places like Nordstrom, sold at places like Anthropologie, even places like Revolve sometimes, but it is just very saturated. And similarly to Cloth & Stone, there's not a ton of differentiation between the pieces that they put out last year versus this year, and so there aren't a lot of particular styles that are very sought after. And so I rarely pick up Splendid anymore, and my experiences with them recently have really just kind of been poor. One exception is certain boots, and booties can do really well, especially if they're in excellent condition. But again, it's not all styles. Definitely check comps if you come across a Splendid boot or booty in the thrift store. And sometimes when I've picked up Splendid booties, it just takes a while for them to sell. So I've had to train my brain. No, we don't pick up Splendid, but I no longer pick it up at all anymore. Okay, so we're almost done with this list. Only two more brands. So number 9 is Blank NYC, and this is a brand that has a pretty big exception. Certain coat styles and leather jackets or suede jackets can do really well by Blank NYC. However, they actually don't do, at least in my experience, as well as they used to. I used to pay up for suede jackets and do retail arbitrage with Blank NYC, and it would always sell within a month at least, sometimes faster. And nowadays I have pieces by Blank NYC that are suede that have just sat for so long, over a year, or just took so long to sell. And so I'm much more hesitant to pay up for Blank NYC in those categories. Definitely would recommend checking comps before you do so, because there are certain ones that can do really well, but generally I think the demand has just gone way down because potentially there's just more of it on Poshmark and eBay, and it's just a little bit too saturated. But shorts by Blank NYC, jeans by Blank NYC, I mean any other kind of clothing by Blank NYC, I typically 9.9 times out of 10 will pass on in the thrift store, especially considering that Blank NYC is a brand that's been around for quite a while, and so a lot of their pieces are just not going to be on trend and not in style. So I am pretty much done with Blank NYC. But moving on to my last brand, this might be a little bit controversial, and that is James Perse. I come across James Perse actually somewhat regularly in the thrift store, but I very, very, very rarely pick it up. And I will check comps on it from time to time, but will just typically pass. There are exceptions. I've actually sold a James Perse jacket that I'll put a picture of up on the screen. I think I sold it for over $100 or something on eBay. It was new with tag, it was brand new, a newer style. So there are exceptions. Newer styles, especially ones that are new with tag, can do really well. And cashmere pieces by James Perse can do really well, but the basics by James Perse, especially the older styles, don't do very well. And especially t-shirts, you know, long sleeve tops, Henleys, even older jackets, just they don't do well. And similarly to a lot of brands on this list, there's just not a lot of differentiation from year to year in their styles. And so it's hard from a consumer standpoint to buy pre-owned because what's recent, what's not. And so, you know, the $10 one from 2010 looks pretty similar to the $100 one from 2020. I think brands that really focus on basics, I mean, Splendid is another one on this list, have a hard time really retaining a resale value because once the market becomes flooded with the high quality basics of older years, there's just not a lot of difference. And so James Perse, sadly, I'm skipping on you. Probably 9.9 times out of 10, and even when I pick it up at the bins, I have a hard time getting rid of you, especially like the button down shirts, women's shirts. Ugh, I won't even touch that with a 10-foot pole, and the men's pieces also just typically won't do that well for me. So there you have it. Those are 10 brands I'm no longer really picking up at the thrift store anymore. Let me know in the comments down below if you disagree with any of these brands. Also, let me know a brand that you are just no longer touching with the 10-foot pole, maybe with a few exceptions. But I had fun putting this list together. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to give it a big old thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I will see y'all in the next one. Okay, love y'all. Bye.